Welcome to The Frontline, a leadership and business podcast brought to you by Peregrine Corporate Services, an Isle of Man-based fiduciary provider. My name is Martin Hall, and thanks for listening. In this podcast, we chat to an array of business leaders from different sectors to learn more about them, their market, skill sets and knowledge. We hope you enjoy. Today I'm joined by Jennifer. Thanks for joining me today, Jennifer.
Thank you, Martin.
So maybe to provide the listeners a bit of background, where were you originally born and sort of educated your early years?
Well, that's a bit of a mixed bag. I was born in California to a German father and a Swedish mother. Grew up in Germany, but spent a lot of time in Sweden. So culturally, I think I am a cross-culture person who's been educated through the German system, but then went back to California to become a chartered accountant many years later and stayed 10 years there.
What brought your parents back to Europe?
My dad's the managing director of Hughes Aircraft Company and as a physicist, he was skilled in German physics, and therefore they wanted him to continue the trade in Germany. And we're based in Bonn, which is the old capital of Germany.
All right, okay. So then you mentioned through the education system in Germany, was that higher education there as well?
It was through what I suppose you call the A-levels here. It's all changed from the time that I went to high school. And interestingly enough, they sent me to an international school that had American teachers. So I visited the school recently, and they have English-speaking teachers now. So all the students have an English dialect instead of American. But I went there many, many years ago. And then because of that, we were able to spend 3 months every summer in Sweden, which is where my mother's from, in Stockholm.
All right, okay.
So we grew up properly with, growing up with 3 languages at home and being influenced by the foods and the languages and the countries that you're living in. So it was quite a nice way to be brought up.
I presume you're multilingual.
Yes.
Fully fluent German,
yes.
Swedish,
yes.
English.
School, learned French in school. You'd think that having grown up with 3 languages, it would be easy to learn a 4th, but in fact, it wasn't that easy. So, hot tip is if you have any kids and teaching them languages, please teach them, when they're very young, because it comes naturally. You think everything has 2 names, like apple and apple, but in fact, it's 2 languages. But as a kid, you don't understand that, and then after a while, they become, turns into 3 languages. It takes longer. It took longer to learn how to speak, but I've made up for it since then.
So then you moved into, or you seem to have started in the accounting world. Was that something you particularly wanted to do at that age, or just fell into it?
Yeah, probably not. I started out studying biology in California. So I moved back to California because I was born on a visit in California and have dual citizenship, or eventually had dual citizenship. In fact, now I'm just Swedish. But in those days, I had American citizenship, and I went to the state university and studied microbiology for a long time. And then I ran out of money. It's quite expensive to go to university in America. In Sweden and Germany, they're free. So, in hindsight, maybe I should have studied in Sweden. But so I thought, well, I need to be practical. And I was, I had all these student loans. So I thought I'd switch to becoming an accountant. So I became a CPA, and no regrets.
Did you study that outside of the work environment? Or was it all kind of for on about it?
So it would have been joining Deloitte straight after university.
Right.
So I studied international business is what I graduated in, with a minor biology, and I'm still passionate about the sciences. But I think work-wise, I was actually concerned about getting a job, and a lot of my friends in those days were not working in science, even though they had graduated. And of course now it's all different because a microbiologist is sought after. But in those days it was different. It was in the 70s. So I switched to becoming a CPA. No regrets, because Deloitte's, in fact, Toucheras at that time, recruited me. And I stayed with them for 17 years, which was a fantastic career. Spent the 3 first years in California. Then I transferred with Deloitte to Luxembourg. And
I presume that was something you wanted to do rather than work asking you to go that way.
Yes. I was missing Europe. I think having grown up with all these different cultures and languages, and I love being in California because I'm a keen surfer, I'm a keen skier, everything's just there. I live in Southern California, it was fantastic. But at the same time, I was missing a little bit being able to walk to work, walk to, everything's being in a car. And, it was a fantastic 10 years in California. But having moved back, I realized there's an advantage working in Europe, and that's you get a lot of holidays. So I went from getting 2 weeks of holiday with Deloitte to 6 weeks. And gosh, you can really see the world with 6 weeks of free time.
Yeah, and a lot easier to, I suppose, see other cultures around Europe because you're traveling a lot shorter to get to those places.
Exactly. So I went to South America, North America, Australia, Hawaii twice, and all Asia, and I wouldn't have been able to do that had it continued with just 2 weeks holiday in California. So when they called for me to return after this exchange in Luxembourg, because it was only meant to be 2 years, in fact, just like the one here, I was only supposed to stay 2 years on the Isle of Man, but there you go. It's been a little bit longer than that.
So did you not go back then? Was that design not to go back? You're like, no, I'm quite happy here.
In fact, yes. So I was spending a lot of time traveling, meeting, colleagues and friends from different cultures, and also working. We kept on, the methodology was the same, but if you work with a German team or a Swedish team or an English team, they all have different cultures, so you were using skill sets as a senior manager in a different way than if you had just worked in a same culture environment. And I think that has stayed with me, that you can't manage different teams in the same way. You need to use different styles.
Yeah, interesting, because I presume underlying that within Deloitte or any big firm like that, there's a general ethos, but then there's that cultural difference at each level.
Yes. So you have a fairly open culture, where they really encourage your skill set to develop that. You have a lot of ambitious, you don't have to micromanage or chase, which I've learned you need to do maybe a bit more once you leave the practice. But you do have different styles by country. So for example, Sweden so after a few years in Luxembourg, I then transferred to Stockholm after 7 years, and Luxembourg was very international, but Sweden was very open door policy. You don't make a decision yourself, you need to get the agreement of the board, to put forth an idea, and then you discuss it very calmly. You don't have any very excited board meetings, or where people get raise their voices. It's actually a very well-behaved environment, but as a result, it takes a long time to make decisions and get those decisions through. So I learned that from then working in Stockholm at Deloitte for the next 7 years.
Yeah, okay. That's and did you think in hindsight that's just something you learn as you spend time there?
Absolutely, because you don't know what to expect when you first come. It does help to be familiar with the methodology and the company culture, because every firm has a fairly strong company culture, and they still do, as do other larger businesses in the Big Four and banks, etc. But what you don't know is how the staff, their relationship with their managers. So when I first moved to the Stockholm office, I would be very focused trying to get through all the work, and then they would say that you need to make sure to take a break every afternoon and spend 15 minutes with the staff, so that as a manager, so that you get to know them a bit. So you find out what their sporting interests are, do they have any family, any kids, or talk about anything except for work. So that was not what I was used to, and in fact is probably not done as much on the Isle of Man.
No. Funny enough, having just in the business we're in now gone through that phase of reviews, that you always sit down and think I need to do this more often with staff, sit with staff. Excuse me, the firefighting of any business, you sometimes often lose sight of that.
Yes.
But it's good if it's inbuilt into the culture, I guess, that this is what you have to do.
Yes, it is expected at 3 o'clock you take what they call a fika. Now that's a coffee break, and it is expected that for 15 minutes, you leave your office and you stand in a rather open floor plan kitchen area, a dining area, and then you just chat away with anybody who's standing around having your coffee, have a little cake, and then you go back to your office. So, and they make sure you keep your door open in case someone follow up with anything. So yes, it's good learning experience.
So presumably a fairly big step to leave there after a long period of time. Did you feel that it was, or was it just felt time was time for change?
Absolutely. I mean, the reason I moved again was because I was hoping to make partner at the Deloitte's office in Stockholm, and and then because of the Enron Anderson experience that we had at that time, there was a bit of restructuring. Anderson, there was a reverse takeover in Sweden, and so a bit of a change at the senior management level. And so a lot of us who had been there for a while were encouraged to gain more experience by living abroad. And they gave me an option to either work in the Isle of Man or in Jersey for 2 years, again for 2 years. And I asked, was the weather about the same? And
someone lied to you.
And yes, they thought so. And then I was hoping to not have to rent. So I said, well, can I buy a small place, apartment or something? And they said, well, not in Jersey, but you can in the Isle of Man. So they flew me out here in October to see if I liked it.
So what year would that be now?
That would have been 2003.
Okay.
In October 2003. And it was sunny and there was no wind, and it's very green here. At that time it was getting a bit cold and damp and, less beautiful in Sweden. So, and darker, of course, because of the winter hours. And so I signed the contract and came over for 2 years, and that was 16 years ago.
Right. Yeah, it's a long 2 years. So obviously you work in Deloitte here, and
yes, so I started in January. Of course, when I arrived, it was no longer sunny and calm. It was
what's going on here?
It was raining, and I thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? So, but like everybody comes here, you become drawn into the culture here, to the community spirit, to the way that the businesses are run at a smaller scale. We had about 700 staff at Deloitte in Stockholm, and there are about 20 here. So that was a big adjustment for me, size-wise.
And just looking at the Isle of Man, when you talk about that community and having lived in many or a number of other places, have you seen that in other places? That community Isle of Man feel, not to the level you get here? No.
I think it has two folds that you have. It's very specific to the culture here. I think that's why it is a special place to live, because the people here make it their home, because a lot of us come from somewhere else, at least 50%, if not over 50% now. But also because of the size, we are a smaller community. So would this be the case in other smaller communities? Possibly. But I think at the same time, we don't have a small town atmosphere because we are quite international. Those are here. So you have the best of both worlds. You have the small community feeling, but yet with the experience and cultures of having been living abroad and meeting others who've done the same.
So left Deloitte, moved into... There was an immediate movement into the gaming environment, or how did that transition happen?
Pretty quick.
Seems not a strange jump, but when you look at a CV or look at a progression.
So after a few years at Deloitte, and then I realized I was going to make my home here in part because I met a certain gentleman that I'm now married to from Liverpool, and he was not that interested in moving to Sweden for various reasons. So I thought, okay, I'll make my home here. And then I thought then maybe it was time to change direction and work in in industry rather than practice. So I asked a recruitment agency, what industries were growing. They gave me two choices. They said online gaming or life assurance. So the insurance business was also growing, and I had experience from Luxembourg. So I applied for AXA and headed up the finance department there for a while. And that was a really good experience because, again, I was used to working with others who were quite eager to prove themselves. And now you're working in a normal environment with families and staff who are from different backgrounds. And as much as I enjoyed working at AXA, it was a different way of dealing with departments, for example. You're not just an audit. You have your compliance and sales and legal and finance. So that was very interesting to take with me. And then I was headhunted for a gaming company after a couple of years. And we set up a small business, which then grew into a company by the name of Annexio, which I'm still a major shareholder of, but I have retired from.
That must have been, I assume, quite an exciting opportunity at the time. And was that daunting then to kind of, I use the word switch industry, but switch? Because it seems like a big switch from the outside.
Yes. Probably having lived here for a few years already. The nice thing about the community spirit is you feel quite secure in being able to change jobs, because you have that support structure around you anyway. So if you've built relationships with your suppliers, with government, with your colleagues, and they can be very supportive too, I felt quite comfortable taking the leap into online gaming, and not having the distractions of children, which I have to say I admire all the families with kids and having during this lockdown period. My goodness, that must have been, I do admire the skill sets that you need to multitask, but I could be very focused. I could work long hours. I was used to that anyway. And I enjoyed the challenge of online gaming, and it was a growing sector.
Yeah,
so
so looking back, is it a steep learning curve for you?
Possibly. I suppose it is different, but every day is a learning day. So I enjoy the challenges of changing directions. So no, I was still focused on finance, but then becoming the managing director probably was a different challenge, because then you have to balance maybe the challenges that you have within internally from the company versus your face that you are now of the business. And I think managing that and the media and so forth was something I wasn't used to, and I did have to learn, through experience.
And it must have been, I suppose, back then it was obviously very much a start-up, so
yes,
so many, I imagine, different aspects from like you say, from partnering or being in that environment of Deloitte,
yes.
And even AXA, big firms with.
Yes, true. I mean, I suppose I've been doing it for such a long time now, because I'm involved with a few businesses, and that does seem now a long time ago, having worked for bigger companies. But I do agree that there was a time you have to be quite confident in your decisions. You have fewer people to ask. In fact, one of the reasons I joined the Institute of Directors, and that was about 10 years ago, 12 years ago possibly, was because I needed somebody to maybe ask ideas about corporate governance, what's the best way of structuring a board. And I got that from the idea at the time, and because maybe in a smaller company you don't have all the departments and an internal legal department. Of course now Nexia is much bigger, but in those days we were just a few. We were in fact just 3 or 4 of us, and then grew from there. So the ID gave me something there as a structure and professionals to go to, have lots of cups of coffee, and
bounce ideas around. And,
yes, and we also got a lot of support. Received a lot of support from the Department for Enterprise, DFE. We applied for grants. We were able to get a few grants, and I think that the close working relationship and the way that the government supports entrepreneurs and smaller businesses on the island is fantastic. I do know that if it hadn't been for that close working relationship, and also with the GSC, they were very helpful in allowing us to grow and work with us with different business models that we had as ideas. So my experience working with the government and civil services is very positive.
Yeah, no, and I think governments always get criticism from all angles, but I think when you look at how they try to develop the island from a business perspective, certainly my experience has always been very, very much they're at an open door. We're here to help you. How can we help you? We've done roadshows with them. They're about helping grow business, not cause a stumbling block. So
absolutely. So we were able to grow the company quite quickly, and I stayed there for 8 years. Until the day that it was time maybe to look at something else, because it had grown to the size that there were actually now, each department was filled with a brilliant, talented director or senior manager.
That decision then to step away, is that difficult? Because there must be an element of, this was my baby, and there's an element of wanting to be in control.
Very hard. In fact, I stayed on for an extra year as a NED, because it is, if you've spent such long hours, for so many years to build something to where it is today, or even, it's grown since then. It was hard to move on, but at the same time, it was the right decision, because you have to always, as a director, I think you need to think about the company first and foremost, and your skill set and the experience that you brought on was ideal to grow the business, but then it was maybe time for
fresh blood,
as
they say.
Exactly. So
it's quite a I imagine at times it's a very hard decision, that, because I go back to it becomes your baby and you don't want to let go, but maybe it's actually for the better.
Yes.
For the better. So the IOD, that's your interaction with that's expanded over the years now.
Absolutely. So I was asked to join the committee about, I believe, let's see now, that would have been 12 years ago. And then Sally Bolton was the chair at the time, Clive Pierce the chair after that. And now I've been the chair for nearly 4 years. And never thought that it would have been on the committee that long, let alone be the chair. But it is something, again, that if you get involved and you commit the time and see the benefits of the Institute. It's been around since 1906. We say that, we're the voice of boards. So if you need, training on corporate governance, if you need to develop the skills, or if you want to influence government, or if you simply want to connect with other NEDs or other directors, it's the perfect forum for that. And so I've continued with the IOD over the years. And in fact, this year is the first time that we've set up a separate limited company. So we're actually IOD Isle of Man Limited as a company limited by guarantee. And not really to break away from the UK because, obviously we have our IP and the professional development that's still very much in line with how we want the Institute to be run, but we wanted a bit more control of the data. We have closer contact with the members, be able to reach out quicker, maybe have a bit more flexibility in how we run things on a day-to-day basis. I have a fantastic colleague, Rachel McKenna, who's the EO, who does all the background work and is involved with the event management. And that has really been the right decision for us. Yeah, right.
And perhaps people aspiring to be a director or continue to, professionally develop, type of skills are they going to be? I mean, maybe it's stating the obvious. Maybe it's not pick up in studying and becoming part of the institute. I assume just a broader range, a broader knowledge,
it is,
contacts, network, and everything that comes with that.
Absolutely. So for example, here we have a lot of medium-sized companies where the shareholder is now also the director, most commonly. And then you have decisions that you need to make for the business that might not be in line necessarily what you would do as a shareholder, but is the right decision for the company. Yeah. And that's what the board is responsible for. So what you need is a mixed skill set at board level. And that would mean that you would need to have the proper training in corporate governance. You would need to understand marketing, finance, and other skills that might not be what you've been, what you've actually.
Imagine conflicts is where you talk about with having a couple of hats on.
Exactly.
Understanding that conflict and dealing, it's not a problem, but dealing with that conflict appropriately in the governance.
Exactly. So with the ID, you have an opportunity to work with other people across different markets, also different industries. Because I remember that I was very involved with just online gaming for a long time, and I didn't want to lose sight or touch with financial services and the building sector, the hospitality. And there's so many needs and demands that are put on these boards also. How do you decide, what works best for these businesses? And you get an idea by going to these courses, by meeting other directors, to learn how to do this to the best of your ability, but also to share and delegate that to others at the board, because everybody's equally responsible at a board level.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then I know, which we'll come on to a moment, how we first crossed paths with the Solidarity Fund, but to maybe cut with the hospice side of things, you're involved with that side of it as well?
Yes, I am. Thank you for mentioning that, Martin. It's a small charity, also called Diana, Princess of Wales Hospice Care at Home Trust. It's a very long name, so we go by Hospice at Home, and our website is Hospice at Home, and it's separate from the hospice. We are a not-profit company. We take no fees for our services, raise about $100,000 a year, and that goes to at-home care for those who prefer to be at home. And we've been doing this for 32 years. Friends of Princess Diana set this up at that time. And we've obviously spent that trust money a long, long time ago. So we've continued with the idea of trying to raise money through different events. For example, right now we're doing a monthly Radney Foylan walk. We walked from Kirkmichael to Sartfield on last Monday. We didn't on the Sunday because we had also the Media Fondo to participate in, but that was a tough walk actually on the beach. So it's also fun because you not only are raising money for a good cause, but you're also meeting people you never would normally in a business environment. So it's a great thing to be part of.
My dad's sadly my dad's used it, but I know the benefits of it and seen the benefits of it. So that is that for you just something to give back to the community? You know, it's your own time, it's your own. You know, we all have lives to lead. Is that just something you feel you need to do as part of your
yes, I think it's
living on this planet type of thing?
Who would have thought? Because charities in, for example, Sweden are not supported in the same way because we have our 61% taxes that we pay there. So, for example, hospice is something that the government provides. That's not the case here. We have 700 charities on the island, and when I was first approached to get involved, I found it actually quite hard to ask for funding. You know, how do you go out to people and say, oh, by the way, can you pay £10 for this? You know, I have no issues with that now. You ask me and I'll say, oh, well, would you like to do this? But can I ask for 25?
Shaking by their ankles to get out of them.
But it took a long, long time to get used to that because you have to remember you need to do it for the right reason. You're doing it not just for the the networking or just to keep busy, but it's because it's serving a purpose. In this case, it's serving a fantastic cause where I know a lot of people benefit from being at home with their family, but because it's part of the society here, it's part of the community here. If you don't do any charity work, I think then you're missing out because obviously as I met you through Manx Solidarity Fund, that's a second charity we've both gotten involved with just in the last few months or this year, because there's a need for it and it provides a purpose. It gives a fantastic service and it helps lots and lots of families, other businesses and charities by doing what we're doing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So maybe just to jump over to the Manx Solidarity, we've obviously both got involved in that around April when it was established. Obviously did a lot of fundraising to start with, and certainly we hope on the Isle of Man its profile's increasing. I think as well, we're still obviously ultimately still in the middle of COVID. Who knows where it will lead up. We're recording this, the borders have slightly changed quarantine rules, but the reality is the situation's the same and we're kind of still in lockdown. So tourism struggles and that industry struggles, and there's many people still struggling that are looking for help, that need help.
Certainly certain sectors are really, really needing help from either the Manx Solidarity Fund or other charities that can provide the service. I mean, what I like about Manx, I'll say MSF, the Manx Solidarity Fund, is that it does help anybody that needs the assistance should they really be dependent on requiring additional funding. And it could be any charity, it could be any individual, it could be any company, and it's also a charity set up that is time limited. We're hoping that it's not going to be around, unlike Hospice at Home that's been around for 32 years. This one we're hoping is going to, once we spend the money, we've spent the money. Of course, not too soon, because we don't expect this to be the end now. We expect possibly that the way this new normal that we're living in is going to be here for a while, and possibly, potentially when the grant funding from government comes to an end, this support this month, then more will apply for assistance through the Manx Solidarity Fund, because they may have applied before, but they can always reapply should they have been turned down. But we've helped quite a lot. We've raised almost £700,000. We've given grants out which don't have to be repaid and it's not taxable, and of almost £300,000, which is equivalent to approximately 50% of all the applicants that we receive, and it's a wide range of those, those that we're helping can be anywhere from the ones I can mention, Ginger Hall and Paddle Boards and Karma, the ones that maybe a bit more anonymously that I could also mention is a single parent, a widow with 2 children, a sole trader who had spent the reserves.
These people live in hand to mouth, aren't they? And
yes.
I think when you see cases like that, then the opportunity for the fund to help them is so important.
It's been absolutely fantastic. The kind of emails we get and the comments and the thank yous is, sadly, we don't actually meet these people personally because, or not very many of them, because they go through the application process, and we have this very almost Chinese wall between myself, chairing the funds team, and then you have somebody else chairing the applications team and the distribution and so forth. So it is a very structured charity, because what we want to do is make sure that the money that everybody's raised for us, Chris and Barley raising over 100,000, running 19 marathons in 19 days, and I think still to this day that's amazing that he's done that, and raising the profile, it's money that, and even I've been handed £5, £10, £20 at different events saying, please, put this towards the charity. So every single penny should count, and we need to make sure it goes to the right people. And it's a tough process. I know that, say if you haven't received a grant, then I would just recommend, reapplying once you feel that you really need the help.
No, I couldn't agree more. One of the observations, we've only known each other for 3 or 4 months as an observer, is you seem very driven, seem to be always busy. Where do you think that's from? Is that something just built within you, or where do you think that's from?
I think...
or maybe you're not, I don't know, but that's my observation.
Oh, thank you. No, I like to keep busy. I enjoy what I do. And I think if you're passionate about something, then you do get a kick out of it. I'm not a long sleeper. I have many hours in the day that I can fill, and I like to fill it with things I like to do, which is, being creative with business. I've got a couple more gaming companies that are B2Bs that are about to launch. I continue with the ID and the charity work. So then, of course, you need to find time for family and yourself, which I tend to.
Do you find that a hard balance at times, or?
Occasionally, because I think working as a NED, you can't control when board meetings are being organized. You're dependent on that. So sometimes I have weeks that I'm very, very busy, but that's okay, because that means you'll never get bored. There's a lot of variety, and I love the people that I work with. I do get a lot of inspiration from working with talented and inspirational people. I think that's probably where I get some of the drive. It's not necessarily from me, but it's it's reflecting those that I get to be with and learn from, because every day is a learning experience.
Right. For those wishing to reach out to Jennifer, her LinkedIn profile is within the show notes. As you will have noted towards the end of the podcast, we were unfortunately losing some of the sound quality, but we would like to thank you for listening and thank Jennifer for her time. Thanks again for listening.